welcome to the Keep Learning podcast. My name is Alicia Siska.
And I'm Matthew Mesley.
And today we have another special guest for our conversation about peer learning and collaboration. She came and she conquered when the world went all bonkers, making peer mentoring both virtual and compelling, and watched our students excelling. A warm welcome to Dianne Evans.
Oh, thank you so much. And big thank you for inviting me. I'm just delighted to be here.
Oh, pleasure to have you here. So, Dianne, you joined our team in the middle of the pandemic. So even though so many months have passed already, we actually haven't had a chance to meet in person yet. Isn't that something?
No, and I think it's really, to start with, it was quite interesting, and weird in the way of I've never met anybody, but I've really acclimatized to the way of working. So the weird is going to be if I ever actually come into the university.
I'm with you there, because obviously I haven't been, except for my interviews.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. It's amazing how we have been forced to think and work and be in different ways now. But so how has this experience been for you in terms of working with Pulse leaders and the Writing Cafe? And what has changed? How do you feel and think about it?
I think, first of all, I've really got to express admiration for the way in which people adapt. And I think as human beings, we're really good at adapting to our environment. And I always sort of think history is what people made of their geography, and the geography of peer learning at the moment and collaborative work is in the environment of Zoom mainly, and Teams. And so I think watching that adaptation for me has been great, because I've learned as well, because we learn from each other about different techniques, certainly about technology, and to actually see the students just embracing, okay, this is a different way of working. In some cases, it's a better way of working, and we will just make a good job of it. So I've been truly impressed by that.
Yeah, they've been fabulous, haven't they? Do you think there have been any particular challenges in this kind of online environment?
I think for initial stages, I think some of the challenges have been acknowledging that you can't do a like-for-like environment. You can't create that. And I think it's trying to take some of the really key facets of the physical space and trying to incorporate them. So things like creating a trusting, safe space where people feel okay to speak, or using facilities like breakout rooms if you've got people who are reluctant to speak in larger groups. So I think to try and create a like-for-like environment, it's a huge challenge, but it's taking what you really need, those key ingredients for peer learning, and trying to transpose those into another format.
And of course, it's not just about putting it online, but also, within peer learning, the main kind of ingredient is collaborative learning, right? So that kind of need to learn to collaborate. And our society now more than ever probably really desperately needs people who can collaborate, who know how to work together. But at the same time, I feel, especially within the university environment, there's a little bit of tension there, because university is primarily about individual achievement, right, and not group achievement. So how do you feel this is negotiated within peer learning?
I think it's negotiated because you might have an idea, Matthew might have an idea, and you put those two ideas together and you get a great idea. So I think it's really that, that old adage, two heads are better than one, comes into play. And sometimes if you share a task, and divide the learning, you will really come up, with a much greater solution or a product if you like, to that. So I think collaborative learning actually helps you progress into collaborate work. You know, it's really difficult to learn completely in isolation, to study in isolation, or to work in isolation. There are very few occupations that you could actually achieve that. I can't even think of one that springs to mind, to be honest.
I mean, even a writer, right? We have that kind of vision of writers being these solitary figures, you know, having the rooms with a view and, and actually just writing on their own. But even if they want to publish, they have to be with that circle of people and need to collaborate, negotiate. They need to, well, know how to work with others. But I think it's a massive challenge. And not just at the university level. I think it starts earlier, but obviously that's not our concern. Our concern is the kind of university level. But what would you say are the kind of the key challenges to this type of working and learning?
I suppose some of it can be a cultural thing. I mean, I've worked with some groups of students where group work doesn't come naturally, and that could be for a range of reasons. So I think that is a key challenge. I think sometimes where you're working as a group together, that you may feel that there's a disproportionate input by you or by others. And I think that can be a challenge as well, to sort of like create a sense of fairness within group work, because it's quite hard if you feel you're doing the lion's share of the work and other people are coasting.
Yeah, I think we've all had that experience, maybe at one point or the other. I always wanted to pick sort of go back to the point that you made previously about how sort of collaboration in learning sort of can then lead to collaboration in practice. And I suppose that is one of the great things about the Writing Cafe, isn't it? That that this collaboration, that writing isn't seen as a sort of an isolated task. It's now, you know, it's something that you can work with together.
Yeah, and wouldn't it be a great opportunity to actually maybe explain how the Writing Cafe works? Because I suppose a lot of our listeners and those who watch us may not know much about it, or just heard that something like this exists. But what is it, and how does it work for the mentors and for those who visit the Writing Cafe?
Well, I mean, my first experience of the Writing Cafe, it's in the digital world, and it's a space that students can come along and they can work with other students, writing mentors, to actually develop their writing. So it's about really helping people to become writers and to develop their academic writing. And I think with any of the peer learning that goes on, I think it's really important to target it and to promote it appropriately. So, you know, it's not really for students who are struggling, although it can be. It's really, for me, it's open to any student, and it's about how you're developing yourself. So it's a really great space that we've got. We have coffee, we have cake sometimes.
Virtual.
Cold drinks, virtual, but it's about, if you went into a cafe, you might go in just to be with other people. You might be there working in a social space, and that's the really nice thing about the cafe. So students come in, they might have a piece of writing that they've started, they might have an assessment task or an assignment that they've been given and they don't really know how to deconstruct it. And the Writing Cafe is there to talk through those aspects with students and with writing mentors. We also have people from the English Language Centre staff that come in there, so they support writers for whom English isn't a first language. And it's just a really lovely collaborative learning space. And the great thing is that we get students revisiting. They might come in 2 or 3 times in the same day, which is great. And then they'll go away and do a bit more work on their writing, and they'll come back and have the discussion. And it's non-judgmental. And I think for effective collaborative work to take place, it's about sharing practice and ideas rather than judging or marking something.
Yeah,
So really,
I think importantly here, maybe we should just emphasize that the collaboration is not collaborating on these papers, right?
No, not at all. It's collaborating on sort of like helping people to develop an argument, helping them to like work from perhaps descriptive writing to more analytical writing.
It's helping them demystify the writing process, I suppose.
Yeah.
But also maybe notice certain things that it's difficult to notice when you're just working on your own, right? And you're the only eyes that ever see this piece before it's submitted.
And I think it's like helping students with different techniques. So very often it might be that, you know, the student learns about a function on the computer where you can get the computer to read aloud the text that you've written. Mm-hmm. So it's using like different technologies. It might be sort of like referring to resources such as, you know, created by the learning development team to actually help them with that toolkit to actually develop their writing.
I find as well that some of my students have said that when they've come, they'll often obviously find it really helpful in terms of what the writing mentors, you know, give them in terms of advice. But they also, I think by going into that space, they're also then sort of stepping back a little bit and looking at their own work as, you know, in a kind of sort of, you know, putting on their editor hat on, and they start to notice things themselves, if that makes sense.
I think it's a reciprocal thing as well, because the writing mentors also, you know, in helping and supporting and signposting to, you know, different things to consider in academic writing, they are actually sort of like reflecting on their own writing style as well. So I think it's a quite, you know, it's a two-way support activity in a way.
Do you think that the writing mentors ever feel the kind of pressure to help in a way that the student who comes away from this experience actually achieves a good grade? So do they ever feel that sense of responsibility that, you know, it has to result in something tangible like a good mark?
I think some mentors might feel that sense of responsibility, but I think, you know, we always talk about how the session went with the student. We try and talk about, you know, what sort of like tools the student has taken away to support them in their writing. So it's more about how can the student help themselves after this visit. It's more about, you know, what are they developing, what were they working on, rather than the mark. And, you know, I think very often people only see a mark. They don't see, you know, the process of writing and the end product. And I think it's important, you know, that they can help them in terms of, is it structure they're working on? Is it analysis? Is it deconstructing a question, rather than just focusing on a mark?
Yeah, I think, you know, this is a very valuable contribution to understanding writing as well as that process, right? That writing is not about the product, that we almost never really create a perfect product. Everything can be improved, and we as writers can be improved as well. But sometimes the attitude may be that, you know, let's just fix this. Something can be fixed, and maybe a student comes to the writing cafe to have things fixed, but instead what they can be offered is a range of suggestions for improvement, or just feedback on what exists already.
Yes, yeah. I think it is about giving people the tools rather than the solutions.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you give them the tools, they can continue to help themselves and support themselves. if you just give them the solution, you've only given them the solution to that one problem, or that one particular topic. So I think it is about that scaffolding through tool provision and suggestions, so that then you've got more autonomous learning that can take place, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So obviously the Writing Cafe, before the pandemic was face to face, but now it's very much a digital space, like you said. Do you feel like do you feel students have benefited from that, from that, the fact that it's an online space now, Dianne?
I think we can look at the figures and we can look at what attendance has been like, and I've not actually got any comparison in terms of my experience of the physical space, having joined in the middle of the pandemic. What I can say is that I think more students have been able to access the digital Writing Cafe because they can just pop in for 10-15 minutes, and it's just much easier for them, especially when we look at the demographic of students visiting the cafe. So we've got a really good age profile split of students who come into the cafe. So if you're juggling other life activities, such as working, perhaps parenting, other caregiving requirements, it might just be a lot easier to come into that space.
A lot more accessible.
Loads more accessible.
I like going back to, I suppose, to what you talked about previously. It can be even more of a safe space as well, can't it? Because you can go in, you don't have to show yourself necessarily on the camera. So it can feel, I think people are more likely maybe to do that than go to a sort of face-to-face, perhaps, for some people.
I think it is, especially if you're not sort of the most confident writer and you've actually got to walk into a space, like you said, physically. It's very hard sometimes walking into a space or a room when you feel everybody might be looking at you. Whereas I think, the option of not showing yourself on screen, and I respect that hugely. We don't always want to be looking at ourselves all the time. So I think I really respect that massively, that if somebody doesn't want to have their camera on, they can still come in and they can still access that Writing Cafe experience that may help them with their academic writing.
I like that. I mean, what I suppose what other question is then, what can you, if you've never been before, what can a sort of student expect when they turn up to the Writing Cafe? Okay,
so we've usually got 4 or 5 of us there in reception. Depends how busy we are, but we sort of like welcome the student in, just have a chat to them, ask them what they'd like to discuss today. If they haven't been to the Writing Cafe before in digital format or otherwise, a quick explanation of how it works, because very often students coming for the first time, they don't know what to expect. They don't know if they're going to be judged on their writing. They don't know if somebody's going to mark their writing. So really just giving a brief overview. And if they are in a state of panic, because some students come into the Writing Cafe and the piece of work has got to be in that day or the next day, and there's a huge sense of panic. And so some of it is about just sort of like just saying, okay, do you want to go and make a drink to start with, and just come and have a drink with us here? Because no learning will take place when somebody is in a heightened state of anxiety and worry. And it might just take 5 minutes of just chatting about the flowers or the weather or what are you drinking.
I love that.
And then you can actually move the student into a breakout room with a mentor to actually go through and reassure the student that they can come, if they want to spend 10 minutes and then go out and come back in again. It's making the service accessible to students, and you can make it accessible in lots of different ways. So I think it is about recognising students when they come in, recognising whether there's any anxiety or whether there's a panic, because you almost have to sort of like have a period of calm then before the next stage of work can take place.
It's amazing how much this pandemic has taught us, isn't it, in terms of being even willing to adapt? Because I remember, I mean, we all know how, difficult it is to change, and how, certain things that may have seemed unreasonable to us in the past now all of a sudden have become obvious. Of course we can adapt. Of course we can make adjustments to this and that. And it's changed everything. It's changed the way we work. It's changed the way we interact. And even the writing cafe itself has changed in that way as well, hasn't it?
I think it is. And I mean, I think the phrase, we need to get back to normal has been bandied about. The phrase, we need to get back to the new normal. But the one that really resonates for me is we need to get back to better. And I think we've picked up so many good practices through this pandemic. We've learned a huge amount about, how we work in a different way and in a better way in some cases. And yes, acknowledging we've lost certain things through, a lack of face-to-face. Like I would dearly love to sort of like meet everybody properly on the Zoom, that would be great. But I think it is about how we get back to better and not lose all the sort of gains that we've achieved through this whole experience.
I think, carry on, let's see.
No, it just reminded me of some plans that exist already, which use words such as evolve and transform rather than return to whatever it was. So that sense that we have to build on what we have learned and create something new, be like the phoenix, to spread the wings and actually be so much better, because we can be better. We can do better than we're doing.
Yeah, it's given us a huge learning bridge, I think, to something, like a new world of learning. And I think it's quite exciting. It's tragic what has happened, in terms of the pandemic and the consequences for so many people and families. But in terms of opportunity for changing things, I think, it's really created that, because otherwise, this change to like a much more blended way of learning would have taken more than a decade.
If not longer.
I'm being optimistic, Matthew.
I've done some research about this recently, and the first attempts to create these kinds of blended environments started in the early 2000s. So we have at least 2 decades of thinking about it and basically deciding maybe it's not possible, but actually now it's possible.
I think one of the great things is that the reason why I think it's been successful in many ways is that people are thinking, well, how best can we do this for students? And not that wasn't how people were thinking about it before, but sometimes it was, well, that's what we've always done, rather than how best is it for our students. And so I think that if we can kind of continue with that sort of thread, I think that would be great.
Plus, I think there's also that element of, if you're thrust into something, you just have to make the most of it. And that's what happened to us. But if you want to plan a certain action, then all of these, additional barriers come in. I mean, you have to start planning, and planning can take a lot of time. And then you're thinking about resources, and, you actually have the time to develop these things. And that's why it takes so long often. But if you have no choice, you have no choice.
I think it's very, very rarely that large organisations such as the university are all working together in the same direction for the same reason. It's a bit like a tanker moving forwards, that to actually change direction, it takes all hands on deck. to actually change the direction of something that is very big, that is moving through time. And I think I said at the beginning, I'm really impressed with how the students have adapted, in terms of peer learning, peer mentoring, but also the staff and the university as a whole. It had to change, it had to adapt very quickly. It wasn't negotiable, and it wasn't done in silos. And it was just amazing, really, the transformation. And I came in at the sort of like the tail end of that transformation, but I could really acknowledge the work that would have had to taken place for the organization to have just adapted so very quickly.
Yeah. So there is one more thing that you also do, which is PALS, peer learning. Yeah. And I wonder if these changes affected PALS in a similar way to the Writing Cafe. Do you feel that it has had also these kinds of, created the same types of opportunities and benefits from the situation?
I think it did. I mean, I think it created benefits. I think it probably presented slightly more challenges, because I think for the writing mentors in the cafe to work in a breakout room on a one-to-one basis is different to PALS leaders working with groups of students. So I think the organisation of PALS for PALS leaders, that probably took a lot more creativity and diversity in the types of activities that they would offer. However, I think the upskilling of PALS leaders in terms of using digital platforms like Kahoot, Padlet, Miro, Mentimeter, I think that's been a very, very steep learning curve, and one that's paid off and will reward them in terms of progression into employment or into higher education courses, because I think they've learned very quickly, they've learned to be adaptive and responsive and not sort of be phased when things don't work or go to plan. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something that very often in the world of work, if something doesn't go to plan, especially when you're starting off, if something goes slightly awry, sometimes the panic sets in and you can't be solution focused because you're worried so much that something's gone wrong. I think what is taught students who are PALS leaders is, okay, we will find a solution. It may not be immediate, we will find a solution. And I think it's that sense of sometimes things work, sometimes they don't, but it's about not everything works all the time. And, sometimes you make mistakes, sometimes things fail, but it's about moving forwards. And I think it's really given the PALS leaders a massive experience that they will take forwards. Because
I love this. I love this. It's like the messiness of life. Here you come.
Yeah, it is. And that's sort of like shared involvement. And they've learned from each other. And, some of them have learned very early on that one of the PALS leaders in their team is very good with tech. One of them is very good at welcoming people into a virtual space and putting them at their ease. Another one is very good at planning. Another one's particularly good at Kahoot. So I think they've learned to work in teams and recognize that within teams, people have different strengths and that can be fluid as well. So I think that's been, again, it's been challenging, but now seeing the leaders, into semester 2 and talking to them, they have gained so much confidence through that process.
Sounds like they've picked up a lot of skills as well.
I'm learning from them, Matthew, all the time. It's great.
I was wondering about, do you have any sort of specific examples of really successful sort of peer learning that's taken place this year?
I think we've, to single out a specific team, I would find that hard to do.
That's fair.
And I would just be honest with it, because I think, I'm just sort of like amazed at how quickly they embraced the tech, and it wasn't just one sort of tech. It was sort of like Zoom, it was Teams, it was all the platforms for delivering and facilitating their activities in PALS. And I think that embracing of tech
and the adaptability, because I liked your point about how, because we all know things can go horribly wrong online and some things might not be working, or breakout rooms just decide not to, like, you know, function. So you have to be sometimes quick to react, don't you?
I think it's been their confidence in trying things and accepting that it might work, it might not, but using it as a learning experience. And so there's been a lot of reflection and evaluation that's gone on, probably more so because they've had to try different things. And, you know, everything doesn't work perfectly all the time. And I think it's, you know, it's been such a great learning curve for them.
So I'm really excited to see what kind of object you chose to represent all this richness that is involved in peer learning.
Well, I chose this object because I think with peer learning, sometimes it's formalized, sometimes it's informal, sometimes it's spontaneous, and sometimes there are missed opportunities for peer learning. And the object, the artifact I've brought in, it's a sort of a wistful, I really wish I could have been there and learned with the person that made this artifact. And so
exciting.
It will look just like a stone. It is, in fact, it's a hand axe, a scraper.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it's Mesolithic. And I just picked it up in a river in Dartmoor.
Wow.
And it fits perfectly in my hand. And so I would never get the chance to learn from a peer about making a hand axe like this. It's ergonomically, it fits right into my hand. It's been napped here. Okay, so it's got quite a good edge on it. And for me, I think peer learning, every day you meet somebody, every person you meet knows something that you don't know. And so the benefits of peer learning are infinite. And my one regret is I'll never get to see the person that made this, or the person perhaps who made this arrowhead.
Oh, wow.
It's
like a Time Team special now.
Yeah, you have a collection.
So this one particularly is really special because I studied archaeology. And so when I found this in the river, it just looked like a stone, and I just sort of was curious and picked it up. But for me, to have sat beside the person that made that, and that would have been part and parcel of, you know, just daily life, making this for whatever reason. And so I suppose that's why I always go back to, you know, like history is what people made of their geography. So it is about the environment, and it is about learning about how to live in that environment, which I think, you know, we've all adjusted to that.
That's very creative.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
But I have one last question, actually. And without revealing too many secrets, I'm not trying to, you know, make you reveal secrets, but I know you celebrate peer learning students who are PALS leaders or writing cafe mentors. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and how you celebrate them, and why you do it, and what might happen this year, maybe?
Well, I understand for the past few years there has been a gala celebration for peer leaders, writing cafe mentors, the academic coordinators who support PALS. And this year, obviously, we are really trying to have a celebration of thanks to everybody that's been involved. Unfortunately, it's unlikely to be in a physical space, So the PALS team are in the process of trying to arrange a very special online celebration. But watch this space. And I'm not revealing too much because, you know, it has to be a big reveal surprise.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Great,
we won't we won't push you, but we've had a little glimpse of these plans and they sound exciting, and I think it will be a really lovely event, a certain closure, yeah, for a lot of students.
I'm so glad I didn't give anything away.
You were sworn to secrecy, Matthew, weren't you? You know that I've got the hand axe, that's the problem, and the arrowhead.
Yeah, but if any students who are PALS leaders or writing mentors are listening to us, you need to be there. Yeah, you can't miss that.
Yeah, yeah, and it will be great. It will be great. It will be different, but it will be great.
Yeah, it was great every time I attended it in the past.
And we need that kind of space to celebrate ourselves as well, don't we? Sometimes, I think.
Definitely.
So. Yeah, and you know, life is not just about doing things that, you know, make us better students and professionals, but also about celebrating what we have already achieved and our experience and sharing in that, and just send these positive vibes.
I feel there's a Forrest Gump quote.
Yeah. Pick your chocolate.
But thank you so much, Dianne, for coming.
Oh, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. And, you know, it's been, you know, any opportunity to get my artifacts out.
yeah, they were great. You really surprised us. So that's always
I know. Well, I'd obviously built it up. I bigged it up
I loved
a lot.
it. I have images of you now with this axe, wielding.
Oh, amazing. Lovely. Thank you so much. It was really wonderful to have you here and to share these ideas, and maybe some of these will even encourage students to feel differently about collaboration, which is a tricky thing.
And go to the writing cafe.
Yeah.
Yes. And even think about becoming a PALS leader or a writing cafe mentor.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
That's good.
So think about it. And in the meantime, thank you for watching and thank you for listening. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast and comment or ask questions. Until next time.
Keep learning.
Keep learning.
Bye-bye.
Bye.